Morning, friends and family. John Miller, your Lake Stevens Realtor, coming at you here on a Monday, February 1st, right before Groundhog Day. A little rainy morning. Keep saying we're going to get snow, but I haven't seen it yet. Seeing next week or week after, who knows. Anyway, so today's second part of what happens when there are multiple offers, and we're going to talk about looking at it from the buyer's side. What do I do as a selling agent when I represent the buyer? There are ways we can make your offer more lucrative to a potential seller. I'm going to go over some of those right here. Number one is, I'm communicating very closely with the listing agent and trying to find out what his seller wants. Are there things that would really work for the seller in that offer? Now, 95% of it's going to be proceeds. It's going to be the amount of money he's taken out of that transaction. That makes sense. But there are some other things, whether it's a quick close or a long close, or maybe he needs a rent back, or there's something he wants to sell it as is, or something just that I can communicate to my buyer so we can structure the offer to make it more lucrative. Now, all offers that I write obviously are meant to meet the needs and wants of the buyer, but at the same time we've got to win the deal for it to go through. I mean, it's kind of a catch-22, is that we've got I want to represent my buyer's interests. And I do. At the same time, if the offers just aren't competitive, then that's something that we need to find a way to improve that. And that's something I do when I'm counseling my buyers when they're making the offer. Anyway, obviously I include all my buyers have your financing in order, be fully underwritten, pre-approved for your loan. Most offers in most price bands, we're seeing escalation clauses. That is an addenda, and basically it's the buyer saying, I am willing to pay $1,000 or $2,000 or $5,000 more than a competing offer, and that number is negotiable, up to a maximum of blank, and that number is something that the buyer determines as well. And then the question then becomes, and this is something that, well, how much should I offer? How much should I escalate to? And what I will do for my buyers, especially in a strong market, is once we see the home, I'll run a quick valuation and tell you this is what I'm showing as value. Now, that being said, in this market, what we're seeing, in fact, this whole thing is very apropos, because I've had a lot of questions over the last couple of weeks from our agents who are in these situations, who have a lot of questions. I've had a few buyers who are in this situation. Some of them it's working for them, some of it's not. And that's what we have, and we call them premium buyers. And those are buyers who are willing to come up over the top, over market, to purchase a home. And there's a few reasons for that. Obviously, we have a very low inventory. We have some buyers that we call it, whether it's frenzy or fear of missing out. There's that pent-up buyer demand, and it has nothing to do with the purchase. It's just simply, they're anxious to get into a home. I don't blame them, especially with the low inventories we've got here in the Northwest. So then the question is, well, if you've got market, why would anyone pay more than market? That's exactly what's happening. So again, market value is the price that a ready, willing, and able buyer is willing to pay in a free and open market. And we determine that on properties, usually with a sales comparison, the sale of competing properties in that area, usually over the last 90 to 180 days. But then the question, is that really appropriate? Is that really accurate in a frenzied market like we're seeing now? And that's a good question, because I can show you, now I think this home is worth not a dime more than, say, $500,000, and then I see the property go on the market, there's multiple offers, it escalates all the way to $550 or something. So, well, wait a minute, John, you said it was worth $500. It is, and I can show you the numbers that back it up. But there are buyers that are willing to pay 10% more just to get into a home. So then it begs the question, well, how much is that premium? If I can get that much more for my home, why aren't I starting at that price? Because those buyers are out there. Well, that's a tough one. There's two reasons for that. One, you can't really count or determine premium buyers, what they're willing to buy, how much they're willing to go up. That's a very personal decision. That's not something that we have numbers on. Number two, the property has to appraise, and that's really what it comes down to. And that forces the next issue that we come, that's the amount of down payment. for my buyers, if you've got to save your pennies, you've got to have material down payment. And that dovetails with the escalation clause. If you're willing to escalate $50,000 over asking, you better have an additional $50,000 worth in cash on top of your purchase to make that up. Because if you're making the offer to the seller, sellers are great, that's $50,000 more, that's fantastic. However, what if it doesn't appraise? What if it doesn't appraise at $550 or whatever it is? Then we have to renegotiate. And the buyer's like, well, I can't afford that. And then the seller's like, well, I don't want to come down in price that much, and the deal will fall apart. So that, what most sellers do, as I mentioned last week, is they ask for that additional deposit addenda. So they negotiate on day one with the buyer to, this is how much you're willing to, to contribute to the transaction if it doesn't appraise at the contract price. If it does, if it appraises at the list price and all, you got a deficiency of $50,000, bank's not willing to loan anything more than appraise, then the buyer comes up with that much more cash. Obviously, in a lot of households, you don't have $50,000 in cash lying around. There are a lot of buyers that are, like, those are the premium buyers that I'm describing. Competing with those is very difficult. So and it's virtually in all price bands. Anything under $1 million in the Puget Sound, we're seeing premium buyers drive the market, and that's frustrating for a lot of first-time home buyers, a lot of buyers who don't have the cash position, whether it's a VA a loan with a zero down, or it's USDA zero down, first-time home buyer with a state bond, again zero down, who just don't have the cash position. You can make a very strong offer, you can be pre-approved, and everything's right. You're really limiting and restricting your contingencies. Nice, strong, clean offer, and you're going to be competing against a half dozen other buyers who have that cash position to make that work. And if you're the seller, they're not going to look at your offer. I mean, they're going to look at it and go, well, that's at the bottom of the pile. It's very frustrating for a lot of my buyers right now, and I feel very bad for them. I hope there's a return to normalcy. We're going to be hearing about that probably mid-year as things return to normal, as the new administration, the federal administration, their policies start to take effect. We'll start hearing about things about the affordability gap. We've got a huge one here in the Northwest, where we always have an ever-growing segment of the population who simply can't afford housing. And there's no simple solution to it, folks. I wish there was. There's a lot of the pundits, a lot of the politicians will talk about that. Obviously, as we talk about this with with multiple offers, you got buyers that are qualified and have hey, I'm pre-approved, but I can't find a house. Unfortunately, that is the market right now. On that note, limiting your contingencies. In 16 years, I've never recommended a buyer waive their finance or their inspection contingency. You always want to have an inspection. Now, a lot of sellers would prefer you didn't. I get that, but I think just from a simply liability aspect, I always recommend my sellers, now you want that buyer to have an inspection, and for all my buyers, yes, you want to make sure you're not buying a lemon. If there's a latent defect out there, then the attorneys get called and nobody's happy. So a lot of sellers are willing to do what's called a pre-inspection, where you do the inspection prior to making an offer, which is interesting. Some sellers will allow that, others will not. A lot of people go, gosh, what if it doesn't come out, or what if I don't get the offer? Well, then you burn $300 or $400 on a home inspection for a home you're not going to buy. But you make an offer pre-inspected, you're okay with the results, that means the seller, okay, we don't have to do the home inspection contingency, we're done, that's one, it's in the past. So other contingencies, if there's this stuff that's standard, title, a well contingency or septic contingency. Some people waive the septic. Some counties won't let you waive the septic. Anything that just doesn't unduly burden the seller. It doesn't really matter whether you have those in or not. Any contingency that does burden the seller, obviously, you might want to consider restricting or waiving entirely. I want, obviously, my buyers to make sure their rights are protected start to finish. But in this market, many of my buyers, and I've had buyers choose to waive their home inspection. I've had people do that. I don't recommend it. I can't in good conscience do it. Anyway, that is what happens when there's multiple offers with as for looking at it from the buyer side. So if you have questions, if you're a buyer and you're like, well, I want to discuss this further, I'm looking to buy a house, give me a call. We can talk about the best way to structure your offers so they're more lucrative. Interest rates, 2.73% on a 30-year fixed. and it should remain low this year. A lot of people saying the market's being driven by the low interest rates. They're probably right. That's it for this week. Wherever you are, stay safe and healthy. We love you. We'll see you next week. Bye.